All right then, Sheffield. How are we doing? Scott, quite thank you. There we go. There is a lot of audience participation in this talk, so I'm going to do that again, and I want everyone to do what he did. Hello there, Sheffield. There we go. Right, we're started as we mean to go on. This is Tales of DOMinica. It's about finding kind of type 0 or DOM-based cross-site scripting, specifically where other people may not. And I did Google what the age rating of 15 meant, because I just kind of popped that on my submission, and it means that I'm not allowed to swear, but not to swear aggressively. So if anyone asks any stupid fucking questions at the end, we might have to upgrade this to 18. Everyone having a nice day so far, at least, though. Minus the horrific temperature that it's been. I am melting underneath this wig, but it's the only time I get an opportunity to have hair, as I am a bald man, so we do what we must. We do what we must. So, by way of introduction, I'm Liam. I'm an application security tester, a dual check team leader, and one of the testers over at KPMG. Here's all my kind of social stuff. I've got a Twitter that's just me rambling. The GitHub does have one or two cool tools on. Obviously, I have to say that, though, because it's mine. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't have one of those crazy QR codes because one, I don't trust myself to generate them, and two, I'm not that tech savvy. Or you can email me, or you can email me at liam@grayrose.com. Please attach cat pictures to your emails. I might actually respond to some questions there. Otherwise, it's probably not getting answered. I'm very bad at staying on top of that. Right then. So, here's some background. There's generally considered three types of cross-site scripting. There's reflected, or non-persistent, stored or persistent, and then there's DOM-based, which can either be stored or reflected, but we still call it a different type because it's a slightly different injection technique. Now, reflected or stored or non-persistent is pretty self-explanatory. Server doesn't store the payload, and the execution happens when the browser renders the content. We're all on the same page. Same with stored, but content is in fact stored on the server and then returned multiple times. So if you request the same page, it will return the same payload even without you submitting it. Right. And then execution happens when the browser renders the content. And then there's DOM-based. Content is injected back into the DOM. We'll get on to what the DOM is in a second if you're not up to speed on that. And then execution happens after this injection occurs, which means that it's a little bit harder to detect. Some people have started missing it, and so it's a good one. If you are, actually, that's a good question. Are there any pen testers in the room? Well, ooh, many pen testers. Lovely. Any students looking at getting into pen testing? That was the right answer. Well, you're going to be an application specialist after this talk, so I don't want any nonsense about red teaming on your applications when I see them come in. Right then. So some background, because we all need to start somewhere. I first got interested in client-side JavaScript facilitated vulnerabilities when I saw a talk by a guy called Tom Nom Nom, or that's his Twitter handle, at DC151 in Leeds. And I was immediately fascinated. The idea that you could attack a user and not have the attack be as a result of a server-side interaction, it was in fact how somebody's built the front end of a site, was quite interesting to me. And so I immediately got obsessed. Quick aside, who here knows what DOM is? Well, lovely. Right, if I get this horribly wrong, can you jump in and correct me? Basically, it's a programming interface for JavaScript to interact with the HTML of a page. And in this context, it's what's generated after the HTML of a page is passed, at which point the JavaScript can start running around and doing its stuff. And this is what we're going to be focusing on today. Now, who here has to work with JavaScript? You poor bastard. It's a bit horrific, as we're going to demonstrate now. You may have seen something to this effect, but JavaScript really funky. So we have 2 + 2, that's 4. We're all on the same page. You know, we all successfully got through year 2 maths. Excellent. 2 + 2, string concatenation. We get 22. Lovely. 2 + 2 - 2. Right. What are we doing here? What are we thinking? Any guesses? Go on. You look like you know. Not a sausage. Okay. 20. Bollocks. Immediately, there's a wrench in the works. Now, the reasoning behind all this is something called a type inference, which JavaScript does a lot of, but the point of it is that it's actually really strange. It's very weird. It does things that it shouldn't do, and it behaves in a way that's not very explicit. So, I needed some help. You may have noticed I have some props here to help me today. Red wine is not great lighting, but that is a glass of red wine. I have 3 more up here, so if anybody does want a glass of red wine, come up and grab one. Because little did I know, or I found this out the hard way, JavaScript's really confusing. It's quite complicated, and it was difficult for me to get my head around. I was a Python guy originally, and then I moved to Ruby, and then JavaScript just didn't follow any of the nice structure that I was used to. So naturally, I had some red wine, and I immediately became an expert. To test this theory. Who said that? We can be friends. So in reality, I used a mixture of Code Wars, which is a site that I can signpost you to, and we did a lot of kind of single-page JavaScript testing. So if you do want to kind of get up to speed on JavaScript, or at least get a little bit better of it, there are some great resources out there for you to learn it and learn all its intricacies, specifically when it comes to kind of attacking and exploiting it. There's also some great books like Violent JavaScript, and the excellent research done by Portswigger, Gareth Hayes, that kind of ilk, to kind of further research into that. But I would also recommend having some red wine. Always drink responsibly, please. Right, are we ready? Yeah, come on. Are you ready? Yeah. Woohoo! Right, we've learned that JavaScript's dodgy. There's 3 types of XSS, and that red wine is really tasty. If we're all sitting comfortably, let's get to the fun bit, which is exploiting DOM-based XSS. So, first step of exploiting DOM XSS is identifying something called the source and something called the sink. Sources are the place where user-supplied content is passed into JavaScript, and then the sink is when that content is incorporated back into the DOM, or otherwise processed in an unsafe manner, which we'll get to in a little bit. Let's have a look at a very obvious example of this. Don't worry, this isn't a code with me. I don't want anybody falling asleep in the audience. So, we have a form, its method is get, actions challenge 1, right? Posts to some challenges. There are some labs for this, so you do have homework, unfortunately. We've got a script. All that does is it defines a function called tracking, which sets the inner HTML of an element that with the ID tracking, so this element here, to search. And then we define some URL params from our URL search parameters, which we pass in window allocation to search. That's just URL parameters. I'm sure we've all seen some of those before. Search term, we just get the search, so search equals, and then we call that function. That then injects that into there. Everybody with me so far? Lovely. I got some nods. So surely the old reliable will work. Now, who here's messed around with cross-site scripting before? Obviously, there's some pen testers in here, so I should see plenty of hands. Lovely. How many of you use Script Alert 1 script as like the basic payload that you just spray everywhere? Right, lovely. Excellent. Look at that, 2 hands up. This man is a script lover in the back. Now, surely that'll work here, right? What do we think? No. So you can see it's injected, and you see it's in there, but we're not getting any execution, which is strange. Surely we should do, because that is valid HTML, and it's in script tags, and we're clearly calling our alert. Let's look at the W3 docs for HTML5, said nobody ever. But here we are. Here's an interesting note. Script elements inserted using inner HTML do not execute when they are inserted. Right, so we've got to think of another way of getting our execution that's not using script tags. So, wait, can we do that? Here, you can see that I've injected an image tag. So if we inject an image tag, this one I've given a valid source of a lovely set of roses. There's a theme to this, if you couldn't tell. And look, we get our rendering. Now, is there anything we can do with image tags? Thank you. If we supply an invalid source and then add the on error to it, we might just be cooking with gas. We might just get something. And we do. So what happens there is we supply our image with an invalid error. The on error event handler then calls, because x, so /x on a site is not a valid. It's not a valid path. It's not a valid image. On error fires, and we get our alert. So I always wanted to build a set of labs where /x and /1 actually resolve to valid images, just to see people banging their heads against a wall. I got called evil when I tried to do that at one of my previous companies, and yeah, got told off. So you're safe for now. Right, bang. Now, we're going to start seeing why this is such a difficult vulnerability, or perhaps not such a difficult one, but why it's missed by so many testers, or at least by enough testers that I'm sat here banging on about it today. If we can see our request and our response here, we can see that we've got get challenge 1, search, image, source equals x on error equals alert 1. Right. Now, if you were scanning for this, if you had an intruder attack and you were fuzzing that parameter, right, what you'd do is you'd grab a whole big list of payloads and you'd see if they were reflected, right? You can tick that selection in the intruder. You can say, is this reflected? And it goes yes, and it flags it up to you, and you're like, awesome, I've got reflected cross-site scripting. It goes into your port, you call your client, you gloat a little bit, maybe not do the last step there. But as you can see here, it's not reflected. It's not in the response. So if you were doing your intruder attack, you'd find diddly squat, and you might miss something. Now, I have actually, on a more genuine note, seen this missed quite regularly by certain pen testers, or over the last probably year and a half, there's been at least 10 to 15 incidents of where we've come in, we've found DOM-based cross-site scripting when a previous pen test has found no XSS vulnerabilities. I won't be naming and shaming pen testing firms here, but you know who you are. Now let's get on to something slightly more advanced. There are some pen testers in the room, and I don't want to bore you to death with the very basics. But we've gone through them anyway. Right, beating basic protections. So we've got our basic payload, basic idea. But again, we just need to go back to what the methodology is, which is identify source, identify sink, find a way from getting from source to sink with some execution, and Bob's your uncle. So I'm really enjoying that. I have a laser pointer. I need to buy one of these. We have a slightly more, anyway, back to the talk. If we have a slightly more complicated set of functions here, right? Well, we've still got function tracking. We're still grabbing the search parameter. We're still being passed to tracking, but this is now even dodgier. We can see that we're evaling a string here. We've got document.getElementById by ID tracker.html equals, and then we define our image. Source is the search term, and that. So this was like a pretty janky way of doing like search term tracking. I haven't seen this in the wild in a little while, but at one point it was occasionally used, and this is just a basic example anyway. So here we are. Now, how do we think we're going to force kind of execution here? Any ideas? Yes, mate, you in the back. Now, that an interesting one. You can single quote. I've got two answers. Right, which one are we going to go with? There's a couple of things we can do. You can do something called attribute injection, which is what you were getting at there, where we try and form this into an invalid tag. But your man up there with a single quote has a better idea, I think. Go to the next one. I got an encode URI in there. I do, right, okay. So the reason why we're beating basic protections is because of the encode URI call, which is going to encode what's going on in here. Forgive me, I've had some red wine. So what we can see is when we go for your attribute injection attack up there, you can see that the space is encoded, which means that then never gets interpreted properly, and you don't break out. And then you don't set your on error. Double quotes are also encoded as well, so you wouldn't be able to kind of break out of that and get to code execution that way. So maybe the eval was the sink, not the image tag. So we go back to the drawing board and we have a look at this. And encode URI doesn't encode single quotes. So 10 points for the man back there. You get a second red wine if you want it. Should start using these as prizes. Oh no, the base has come off. Beautiful. So we can break out the inner HTML call and call alert1 instead. Obviously, you'd make it a bit nastier if you're actually going to do this. But effectively, where's my pointer? We have %27, which is A single quote, yes, thank you. Then we end the comment, we call alert 1, and then we just comment out the rest of the string. And then we have our alert 1. And we can see why it does that here. Now, when I'm actually building these payloads, and sometimes they're a little bit more complicated than that, I will go through and either write this out on pen and paper or do it in a text document, because it just makes it a little bit easier to build up. VS Code can add some excellent kind of autocompletes to it as well. Makes it a little bit easier. But as you can see here, eval has our search term. Our search term is this. So when that then gets incorporated all into one, we can see that we document in HTML image source equals, and then we just close that there. We're starting a new statement, alert 1, and the rest of that is then commented out. And when that gets evaled, this fires first, this fires second, and then that's fine, that works, and then we get to our alert 1, and we get our cross-site scripting issue. And we've beaten some basic protections. And again, everyone thinks you're amazing, your client loves you, or they shout at you. Right, here's an interesting one. I have some, I don't know, interesting hobbies. That's me at the bottom, looking very cross and trying to attack this man's ankle, and that's him at the top. He's lovely, but he was looking a bit worried there, because if I complete that, for those who don't know, his knee explodes, which is very bad. So, none of us wanted that. The point of this is that this is missed quite often by other pen testing firms. And if you can do it, it makes you look really good. It makes you look really good to your client, and it makes you look really good to your bosses who are going, look at this person. They can find all these really crazy vulnerabilities. Little did you know, all you did was you listened to my SteelCon talk. Boom. You can thank me for all the promotions later. But no, seriously, your ability to find interesting vulnerabilities is part of what you're marked on. It's not everything, and it obviously varies business to business. But if you can build up a strong baseline and then start to branch out into some slightly more niche vulnerabilities, but still ones that you're regularly going to see on app tests, it can really help you. Can we fix it? We can, fortunately. It's pretty easy. Well, I say that. Depending on kind of what you're pushing to, it's just character encoding. It's your standard kind of user encoding. Making sure that you don't trust user supplied content, and making sure that user supplied content isn't just not trusted by your backend, but it's also not trusted by the front end of your application as well. So if there is JavaScript that is picking things up and doing kind of all the crazy fun stuff that makes apps look really, really cool nowadays. Make sure that it's not trusting user supplied content either. It's using things like libraries like DOMPurify and so on and so forth that have the ability to properly escape these strings. DOMPurify does have some vulnerabilities in it, so maybe don't push that one to production. But there are other vulnerabilities out there. There are other examples of good what am I thinking? Good JavaScript protection libraries out there. Now, live demos have always gone perfectly for me, so let's see if we can. Does that go into the right screen? We're on the other side. You can find these labs on GitHub. They're you download them. It's a simple Python thing. There may be, I'll looking at getting these hosted somewhere later, maybe from the man in the back there. We'll talking about that in a second. But these are some JavaScript labs. The easy ones, again, they're not going to be found in the real world, not really, unless you're testing very old applications. But the idea is you start to learn to go from source to sink. Medium. Again, these start to be a little bit more realistic. Hard, I've made some of the hard ones just a bit nuts because I'm a bit of a sadist. But the real life ones, these are taken from real engagements. In fact, You've Been Framed, there are a couple more that are going to be pushed to that. Just taking you to get round to actually writing them. You've Been Framed was taken from an engagement we were on where 10 years of pen tests, of annual pen tests had missed the vulnerability. It was a pain. It took me about 7 hours to find across the course of the engagement, but we did manage to get it popped, and it was a really interesting one. If you can solve that one, drop me a message on LinkedIn because we're hiring. We'll see. We'll put this theory into practice then. Any volunteers? Let's pick one. We'll solve it. I'm going to start picking on people. Right, you mate. with the nice hair. Go on, which one are we doing? Don't pick the hard one. Or do. Click. Ooh, okay, we'll do that. It's medium DOM exercise. Some lazy developer left an auto clicker in here. Oops, I can call them lazy because it was me. So let's see what goes on here. We inspect some element. What's going on? Oh, right, yeah, I can do. It's going to be a bit easier. Give me 1 second. Is that a bit better? Can you see that? Can everyone see that, or do we need that a bit bigger as well? Always pray to the demo gods before you do a demo. So this is the function that we're attacking this time. We've got document get element by ID tracker, href equals search, and then we're getting the document element by ID hash, and we're going to click on it. We've got our URL search parameters. Again, simple. We're decoding the URI, decode URI, so opposite of encode URI on URL params.getSearch, and then hashed equals the window.location.hash.slice1, so that grabs everything after the, well, actually, go on then. Any more for any more? Grabs everything after the hash, yeah, lovely. Set you up for that one. And then if the search term is not null, we run tracking on the search term to hash, so effectively what it does is it grabs the ID of hash, it clicks on it after setting the href of a tracker. So what we can do here is we can nice and easily go back and we can set, let's search for something. What are we going to search for? Lovely, thank you. So there you go. Cannot read properties are null. So let's instead grab in here. We've got an ID tracker. We can see the href there is of cats. Apologies, I appreciate that's a bit small. Can we do anything cool with hrefs? Top man, right. You looking for a job? No, I'm joking. And we get our execution. It's the auto clicker in there. Again, not the most realistic in the world. People trend not to leave auto clickers running around in their applications, but it helps to kind of prove the point, and a bit of lateral thinking there. Right then, we have whizzed through this, so see if I can find my slides. As I said before, here's some resources. The Portswigger have some excellent research into DOM-based cross-site scripting. They also have, what's it called? DOM Invader, I think, is what they've called it. DOM Invader will find some of those. It'll find most of the basic ones and some of the medium ones. When you start to get slightly more advanced, it picks up on a little bit, but not so much. But it is still a really great tool. And obviously, Portswigger are effectively leading in the applications research side of things. That's a link to the GitHub where all the code is. There's Code Wars if you want to learn about JavaScript, if you're a masochist. And xsse.uk is a site developed by the gentleman there. It's more cross-site scripting labs, and over the course of the next kind of couple of weeks, hopefully we'll be porting a lot of the DOMinica labs into there, so you can complete them and earn loads of prizes, or points at least. Prizes optional. Do we have any questions? Loads. Lovely. Yes, mate. I don't. I limit myself to only reading one HTML spec doc per talk. I don't, unfortunately, but it doesn't. It's a kind of one of the pieces of interesting behaviour that you need to bear in mind. Yes, mate. Excellent. Ooh. We got. I mean, it was stored, and all the cookie flags were there. It was using JWTs, but for some reason we were unable to grab them. There was a length limit on the field, but we could pull in an external source, which there was functionality in the application that allowed administrators to set the user permissions of another user. So we got ourselves in as a low-level user. It was a single-page app. If you've ever worked with single-page apps or ever tested them, normally you can get a list of URLs from the kind of JS source file or app.js file. We'd found a weird one that looked like it was a user permissions editor. So we'd gone in, or like a content editor, we'd kind of there was this kind of broken access control, so you could inject your payload into the single page app as a low permission user. You're meant to be like medium or high, and then the payload fired and it set our account up to an admin. And then that was the coolest exercise I found. But most of the time you're rushed off your feet and you get like alert document.domain and then call it a day. Yeah. Yes, mate.
Sometimes see XSS in like JavaScript libraries like jQuery, UI, and found pretty rare that that's actually exploitable. I just wondered, is there any of those that you found you've got like good mileage with?
No, not. The JavaScript ones or the JavaScript library ones are quite difficult to exploit, because normally it's like one very weird use of a kind of a slightly obscure function that they have in there that is the vulnerable bit. So I haven't found any in the wild, no. But some of the labs may touch on that. Yes. Cheers. Could you send me that as well? Lovely, thank you. Yes, mate.
You say sites implementing strong CSP. Basically, you worry about this.
No, no. It's CSPs are good. You should set them. But there's a whole kind of world of bypassing CSPs and kind of circumnavigating them. If it's really, really restrictive, you can force cross-site scripting to be less of an issue, or at least make the barrier for entry for it quite a lot higher. But it's not a kind of one-stop shop. Again, it reduces the risk. Yeah, it reduces the risk. It is still possible to bypass those in certain circumstances. Yeah, that's why the AWS WAF, which only scans the first like 8 kilobytes, and you can get past it instantly. Yeah, that's a good fun one. Any more for any more? Yes, mate.
You're talking about how it took you 7 hours to find that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious, how did you already have an inkling that it was there?
I had a little. There was a. Oh, because I had one. The client said there's absolutely no way you're breaking that, and that is a red rag to a bull. You ever want unpaid overtime from your pen testers, say that to them. They'll go to the end of the earth to break it. And the second one is I just had the script. Just there was something at the back of my mind that went, that's vulnerable. That's going to be broken, and I went off on a bit of a mad one and proved it. But yeah. Is that everyone happy? Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and